Welcome to TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja. This is Ange.
Hey.
We've hit 500 subscribers.
Yay! Woo! Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everyone. So, new year. Lots of stuff going on for me. Trying to prepare for the Hobart Forum, Gender Identity in Law. We'll be sending out invitations for that and advertising this week. Exciting news. I've managed to book Exelancic to speak at this event.
Yeah.
So she'll be coming in via Zoom.
Yeah.
So that'll be good. And then like a week after the forum, or 2 weeks, I have to look at the calendar, is you and I are going up to Brisbane.
Yeah, I know, that's exciting. Having just been in Queensland and wanting to move back there all of a sudden, it'd be nice. It'd be nice to catch up with the women in Brisbane. Fantastic.
Yeah. And Anna puts this on every year, Anna McCormack. She does a great job. So
she is an amazing campaigner.
Yeah, she really is. Now, we missed a very important news story over the last few weeks here in Australia.
Oh, yeah, what was that?
An AFL...
You're laughing. I can tell you're laughing. It's going to be a good one. Yeah.
An AFLW player. For our overseas viewers, AFL is our weird Aussie form of football, which a lot of overseas people struggle to understand the rules. We now have a women's league. I think there's been a women's league for about 5 years or so now.
Yeah, much needed. Yeah.
And one of the players, I can't remember her name, I can't remember what team she's from, but she's come out as non-binary, and it's made the news.
Yeah, riveting stuff. So if she's non-binary, how does she know that she should be playing in the women's team?
Exactly. There were a lot of comments like that on Facebook. She should probably withdraw from the women's team now.
See, I take that quite personally, because when I was up until the age of 12, I played football against all the boys in my street, and I was quite good. And up until the age of 12, I was permitted to train with the junior football team, which contained boys, except for the coach's daughter. And when I was about to turn 13, I had to give up. Yeah. I was still physically capable of keeping up with the boys. I don't consider I was in any risk because I was playing against them, in neighbourhood football. But I had to give up because it was accepted to me that, from puberty and beyond, the differences between me and the boys would be huge. So, yeah. And so, to have women to finally, after all these years, I'm 52 years old, and it's taken till 5 years ago to have a professional league. Right. And now within 5 years, women are saying, oh, I'm not a woman anymore. And men like Hannah Mounsey are attempting to get into women's football. And he's built like a massive freaking gridiron player without the padding. And it's so horrible to me, as someone who had to give up sport basically as a child, as a young woman, when I really needed the peer support and the physical fitness and stuff like that, because it is a tumultuous time. I had to give all that shit up for these people to finally get what I always dreamed of and give it away. It's nuts.
Infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. It wasn't until I was in year 12 at high school that we had a girls' football league competition going. But I was last year I was at the park with my little nephews. There's this really good playground for little kids, but it's right next to a big footy oval, and there was girls playing like an official community game of football. And it's like, well, things are changing. That's great. Look, the other thing about this AFLW player is she's a lesbian.
Okay.
I just, the pressure on lesbians at the moment to pretend that they're not lesbians is just heartbreaking.
It is. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah.
They don't even call themselves lesbians, they call themselves queer. Yeah. But then at the same time, heterosexual people call themselves queer as well.
Yeah.
So
Other than that, it's still been pretty quiet here in Australia news-wise. The Australian did run a story yesterday about JK Rowling, an opinion piece. I found it to be rather cautious. It was a female journalist, and you could tell she was on our side.
Oh, good.
Sure. But she focused on, why are we excluding JK Rowling? Why are we excluding her from the HBO special? And she's inspired all these kids to actually pick up a book and read. So we've seen a lot of stories like that from around the world the last few weeks regarding that HBO special.
The mainstream media here just keeps plugging trans kids, the ABC and I think Channel 7, and also Channel 7 also had the Man Has a Baby story. The mainstream media is just relentlessly plugging transgenderism as a positive, wonderful thing. So it's good to see a little tiny bit of pushback, I guess.
What was the trans man has a baby?
Oh, look, it was a UK story. I think he had a baby last year, but some dude, some woman, accidentally falls pregnant as well, while taking testosterone. And oh my God, it's a miracle. And has a baby and raises it. And the article, the most thing I found really offensive about it was it said that the baby doesn't have a mother. She does not exist. And this bloke is a single dad with the violins out. Like we all know that, single dads are celebrated and, oh, wow, they're so wonderful. And single mothers are the scum of the earth a lot of the time. So this person managed to identify out of single parenting as well as their own sex. So I found that all quite offensive. And to say, a new baby's mother doesn't even exist is, well, it's the queer agenda though. It's quite common in the foster parent, surrogacy, foster, all that stuff, to say, oh, you don't need a mother, she's disposable. And yet every single human being on this earth, every child was born from a woman. So it's all rather offensive. But our mainstream media sport it all. They're completely captured by trans. They're plugging it as the most wonderful thing. And there is pushback, but then you get the trans activists jumping in and threatening litigation, like Dean Laidley does when he follows article threads on Twitter and pops in and has a go at people, threatens them for misgendering him and things like that. So although the media is pushing, the pushback is getting pushed by the trans activists. So
I just remembered something in my life that's happened. I finally took the plunge and emailed my federal member of parliament.
Cool.
I did that before Christmas, requesting a face-to-face meeting as one of his constituents, and didn't hear back. They're essentially trying to avoid actually having to have this meeting with me. But I'm going to push ahead with it. I've emailed them again. So setting up a meeting, but it turns out he's a Liberal. Mm-hmm. And I just assumed he would be on our side. He's a gay man.
Oh, yeah.
Now I think there really is two types of gay men. There are gay men that are very sympathetic to women and what women go through in this culture. They get it, they understand. And then there are gay men that just fucking hate women and couldn't give a shit what happens to women.
Yeah.
And I have a bad feeling that he's the second kind. And because he wrote something in this email that he responded to me with, he said, oh, you should know that I'm supportive of people's right to present however they want.
So are we.
Exactly. We can agree on that.
Yep.
Wilson. His name's Tim Wilson, if you want to look him up.
Oh, I know who he is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You should have an interesting chat. Well, he's required to actually listen to your concerns. He's, I'm fortunate. I've got a female Liberal MP, and she's very sympathetic, and she has opposed a lot of the bills that have been put forward to give, trans people dominance over women and things like that. So she's actually been great. I never thought I would be happy about having a Liberal MP.
Well, have you ever met with an MP?
Yeah, I have a few times about various issues. I actually have a good relationship with all my local politicians, from all sorts of backgrounds, because I've advocated for other personal issues. I think I know how to network them.
Yeah.
And I also, I'm not afraid to demand that they listen to my concerns as, a taxpayer. And that's what you have to do. You can't just ask for a polite conversation. They'll be happy to turn up to something with a camera on them, but to actually listen to the individual concerns of people privately, it's harder to get a hearing with them. What they do generally do is they send their secretary or their PR representative to talk to you and say, oh, no, they're in Parliament this week or something like that. And you just basically have to just keep trying and keep trying. But when I have got an audience with them, I have usually found them to really listen, and I've managed to open a few minds about things. I've been lobbying our local government about the state government's introduction of all unisex toilets. So any public toilet in a public park or playground or beach or somewhere like that is installed now, any new from the ground up installation is unisex. And I have a big problem with that. There's certain requirements, like you're not meant to be able to see up and over and above the stalls and things like that, but still it's very intimidating to walk into a space and stand among men waiting to go to the toilet. I don't like it, and I don't like my children doing it. But yeah, so I've been talking to local government about that, and I've generally found people are quite surprised, and they're very forthcoming with saying, look, it's not a local government decision, it's come from the state government. And we know full well that the state government is the one that stealthily put through the self-ID stuff. They've never consulted with women about anything to do with this stuff, ever. It's all about cutting costs, and it's all about giving society the illusion that women have equality when they don't.
Well, okay, I'm a little bit nervous, especially about meeting with him, especially knowing that he's already bought the trans agenda.
Well, I think but then you've got a good starting point with him to produce. You could produce some evidence about the homophobia that's inherent with trans rights activism. Absolutely. And you can say, well, you as a gay man, you should know this more than anyone. How is a 52-year-old woman, a 52-year-old man, who suddenly decides he's a woman, or a 65-year-old one like my father-in-law, who decides he's a woman? How the hell is he an actual woman? How does he have any of the oppression and the stigma that someone like this MP has faced as a young gay man? He hasn't. They're nothing alike.
I thought what I would do is print off a whole bunch of that Google Drive's woke homophobia.
Yeah.
I thought I'd go through that and pick out some of the worst ones where they're talking about, sorry to those listening, but cis gay fags, blah 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 blah. Print off some of them and then just like hand them to him as I'm chatting with him. Well, here you go, have a look.
I'd give him Helen. Yeah, give him Helen Joyce's book too. That's a good overview of the whole trans thing.
That's Anna McCormack sent me some copies. So
oh wow,
that's a good idea actually. I'll ask him if he actually intends to read it or if I should give it to someone else.
And send him a PDF if he handballs it. If I were you though, there's something I would be nervous about with your conference coming up in February that I wish I could attend. Are you worried about protesters and from trans activists trying to cause a ruckus to get media attention? Are you worried about them?
Yeah, a little because we've said that this is open to anyone who wants to come. Everyone's welcome. So trans activists are probably definitely going to be there. We have security, so we're hiring private security. So I suppose 2 of them will be on the door and protecting the door, and 2 of them will be helping get rid of hecklers from the crowd. But, you know, look, ultimately, I think it actually works in our favor.
I do too.
To have them behave badly and be able to film it and send it off to Sky News. Hopefully Rita will air it and talk about it. So yeah.
Whenever I've gone to a function and they've been there, even before I understood what it was all about, so we're going back quite a distance, they have done themselves more harm than good.
Yeah.
And they've piqued more people onto our side of thinking, because back when I was a protester, the cliche was the dreadlocked uni student stoner, was your stereotypical protester, and now it's your blue-haired non-binary. So most of society thinks that person is should have better things to do than protest women trying to defend their rights and defending children and things like that. Like the people that turn up to protests in order to cause a disruption, they don't even understand what they're protesting against. It's just trans rights. What are trans rights?
Yeah,
they couldn't tell you.
Exactly. Look, we have a guest joining us.
Yay!
In the waiting room. I'll bring her in now. This is a Facebook friend of ours, Jo.
A Facebook friend. She's like one of Melbourne's most prominent hands-on TERFs. And she is a Facebook friend.
Yes.
There she is.
Hi, Jo. How are you going?
Hi, Jo.
Yo.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me. It's news to me that I'm a prominent Melbourne TERF.
But you are too.
I'm very flattered. I'm sorry I look like a lobster. The light's very bad here.
You look fine. Tell us, if you don't mind, how you came to be part of the transgender wars. Did you have a peak trans experience? Something happened?
Oh man, look, I thought of a few things. I came out as a lesbian 40 years ago this year in 1982 through a mob called London Friend, which was, it still is a sort of befriending support organisation. And there was a group at Friend, lots of groups met there. The lesbian group met on a Thursday, and there were various different groups. There was, and there was a gay transvestites group that met on another night. They used to whinge about our pool table because, lesbians, pool table. But they were called the Gay Transvestite Group. They were cross-dressing gay men, because everybody knew that cross-dressing is a mostly heterosexual thing. It's mostly straight guys who want to dress up as women and call me Dolores. And, there used to be a place near Euston Station. I'm British, as you can no doubt tell. Used to be a place near Euston Station. It's called something like Transformations, where you could go and spend your weekend mimsying about in a frock and wig. But nobody ever thought that those people were actually the opposite sex. Well, people politely, accepted them, didn't want to be unkind. The first trans person I ever met, and only briefly, was the British stage magician Faye Presto, because the gay guy that lived in the same house as my then girlfriend was her stage assistant. And Faye was a male magician and had to leave the magic circle, which is the professional organisation for conjurers, stage magicians, after transition, because they didn't let women in. But they do now, of course, because dinosaurs. So that was the first person I met. I also had a friend who had a friend called Paul who had transitioned, and she used to say of Paul, you can tell he regrets it. The women he's attracted to are lesbians and they're not interested because he looks like a bloke. Straight women are not interested because he's not really got male equipment. and it was family pressure. So those were the first sort of inklings of contact with this world, but it was a very small part of the world. The transvestite group, I mean, it's disappeared word now, isn't it, transvestite, but that group would be there at Pride, along with the gay poetry group and this discussion group, and that discussion group, Lesbians at London Friend, which I was part of. You know, it was a small corner of gay world, and this very recent, and it is really recent. I know there have been lots of attempts to create a whole provenance, like, oh, there have always been trans people, you just didn't know. No, there haven't. Not in the kind of numbers that people are claiming or suggesting. But, you know, very recently, and the thing that made me think, what the F is going on here, was somebody that I worked with had done a like. It said, Georgina likes Feminist Current. I thought that sounds good, tappa, tappa, tappa. So I read Feminist Current, and I discovered the Hypatia incident, which you may or may not remember. Hypatia is an online philosophy magazine, feminist philosophy magazine. And the editor, or one of their writers, I'm not sure which, had been forced to issue a grovelling apology for dead naming a trans person, because apparently this puts them at terrible risk of exposing them as not being the same sex as they're presenting us. That trans person was Caitlyn Jenner, possibly the highest profile trans person ever, certainly at that time, the highest profile, but you put Caitlyn at dreadful risk by mentioning that Caitlyn used to be Bruce. And to many, I'm sure still is Bruce and always will be. You know, and I thought, that's insane. And then by some avenue, I stumbled into the videos of Magdalene Burns. In fact, I originally only joined Twitter to see how Magdalene was, because there was a video she put out talking about the brain tumour, which would, of course, eventually kill her. And then she didn't do any more videos for some time. And so I joined, but I knew she was on Twitter, and the highlight of my Twitter career has been that she did actually like one of my tweets once, just the once. And so I joined Twitter, and there's this whole cesspool of argument, but you know, I'm an argumentative person and I like an argument. So I joined Twitter for that, and I found this, I think most people now in this war have had the same experience. No, seriously, really? Kind of feeling, looking at it, just thinking, this is bonkers. Nobody believes this. I mean, you know, and the other thing I'd say is that I think it's really unkind to let people believe that they pass. It does not help them, you know, because very few people do. Quite trans guys tend to pass a bit more, the F2Ms, and they may or may not. I don't know, some women, some lesbians seem happy to stay in relationships with a female partner who transitions. Others not so much. I'm sure that's partly because they continue to read them as female, even if they want you to pretend they don't. And some straight women stay with partners who transition. I'm like Janet Rice and her late partner, you know, I'm glad they were happy together. However, is that a lesbian couple? Is it buggery? You know, it's not a lesbian couple by any stretch. And for people to claim that it is, but, you know, charismatic narcissists will always find enablers, and quite a lot of these guys are very self-involved, quite convincing, but we'll never know how much. But it is striking to me how much, and I was reading a trans widow story the other day, and she's telling people, you know, suddenly, you know, if you're raising kids jointly with this guy, she's been with him for years, and suddenly it's all call me Dolores, and but all the sympathy is with him. You know, if your husband runs off with a secretary half his age, or even if he comes out as gay, some of the sympathy at least will come to you. But not if he transitions. It's, oh my God, that must have been so hard for him, the poor thing. You know, because partly because I guess our expectations of women is that they will make, do and mend, and as you're doing, Angela, raise kids with limited assistance from the party of the second part to the creation thereof, you know. So I sort of disappeared down the rabbit hole, and I'm sure bored plenty of people shitless by saying, do you know this? Do you know this? And I think the things people don't know, they certainly don't know that the vast majority of FGMs keep the full meat and two veg, with no intention of changing it. You know, it's part, and also that I think the persecution is part of the fetish, because they want to be afraid, but it's not backed up by evidence. You know, those ridiculous death figures are based on the death rate of Brazilian or Argentine prostitutes, and women in sex trafficked, prostituted, pimped women everywhere are at the highest risk. But the group that gets killed in droves by people they should be able to trust is women. I mean, admittedly, violent men also attack other men.
It's so upside down. The word Orwellian, it
really is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think it's really interesting how this whole false history has been created. You know, if there have always been all these percentage of people that were trans who would die if they couldn't transition, why did none of us experience a rash of suicides at school of the kids who just couldn't cope with having to continue to be boys or girls? You know, and yet it's been, because it's been sold as similar to gay liberation and equal rights for lesbian and gay people and bisexual people, it's been perceived, you know, it's an easy, lazy, virtue signalling opportunity. But none of the people, like that idiotic girl from Harry Potter, Emma Thing, saying kind of trans people are who they say they are. You're not going to go and shag a guy with no dick, are you? You know, none of these people are going to actually offer those people the validation they want. And they also really hope for real lesbians. I can tell you this one would never, ever be interested. But their idea of what's a real lesbian, it's a porn category.
Yes.
You know, it's not an actual person, which is more likely to be a sort of lumpy old 60-something like me, or even younger ones, but they're going to be often quite politically minded women. And then the rise and rise of queer, which means nothing, because it, you know, it's basically a haircut, isn't it? Or hair colour, you know, it means absolutely nothing. And 20 plus years ago, shortly before I moved to Australia, I remember saying to a friend who'd got to Pride, unlike me, I said, how was it? She said, oh, a lot of straight people. And I thought, yeah, well, you were there with your husband, you know, which she was. And it moved from being a demo to a carnival, a festival, you know. And I went to my first Pride in 1982, a few weeks after I came out. It was great. But it took nerve. You had to worry that someone would see you, people could lose their jobs, you know, felt a great solidarity. But not nowadays. But it's as I say, there's been that trajectory towards it being a celebration. So I think people are often very surprised when they learn the thing about the retained todgers, but also, you know, the perception that of the fact that people are asking not for equal rights, but for privilege. You know, gay people weren't asking for anything that other people didn't have, which is the right not to be subject to blackmail, the right to marry our partners if we want to.
Just curious, have you been to any Pride events here in Australia since you moved over?
Oh, a few sort of midsummer type things, but not for several years. Because I can sort of never be asked. Someone I know put together a group called the Pride Fiddlers, who played jaunty fiddle tunes based from the group from the Scottish Fiddle Club. Most of them straight, but good allies. And because I'm not terribly musical and my partner is, she played guitar and I played the drum to keep the beat for everyone. And we did that for 2 years and it was fun. But you can see there the rise of the trans lobby, you know, transgender Victoria and trans, and And I guess the other thing that people don't know and really should know is the rise of the affirmation-only approach. That, you mustn't, if I go to the doctor and say, I really feel like I shouldn't have this right leg, can you arrange to get it chopped off? The first thing my doctor would say, apart from backing off and looking worried, would be, okay, I'm going to need to refer you to a psychologist to talk about that. Where do you think that's come from? Or if I starve myself to the point that I look skeletal and I go into my doctor and I say, I'm really worried about my obesity, can I have some amphetamines? Yeah. Which I've tried before, to be honest, and she's always said no. But benefit from losing weight, give me drugs. She would say, you're not fat. And in fact, you're underweight, you need to put weight on. But why do you think you're fat? Let me refer you to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But if I go in and say, I think I'm supposed to be a bloke, she's meant to do nothing but say, okay, let me link you to the gender clinic. When would you like to start testosterone? I know that people in the UK arguing about what's it called, the British clinic that stuffed Kira Bell, Tavistock. That people are waiting a year or 2 years for an appointment. Well, not if they can pay privately or get onto that Weberly maniac, they're not. But there also, it used to be that in order to do any kind of transition, you had to live for 2 years with the gender presentation you wanted to keep. So guys like the aforementioned Faye Presto had to look for 2 years, pretty much like a guy who wanted to be seen as a woman. And I don't think it's necessarily easy, but it also meant that people didn't then get to 22 or 3 and say, oh my God, I've had my body irrevocably altered, my voice is changed. I just don't think that if someone in their 30s or 40s wants to make that choice, notwithstanding my concerns about the trans widows who are left to pick the pieces up and get next to none of the sympathy, notwithstanding that, that's their choice to make. I don't think it matters whether you believe in true trans or not, because some people do and some don't. Some people think there's genuinely people who have such dysphoria that the best treatment is for them to transition, and others think it's all smoke and mirrors. If someone 35 or 40,
I've come around on this issue. I'm going to say it has been watching Exolansic's videos. The horrific complications, ending up with a colostomy bag and having to piss out of a catheter for 6 months. I'm not sure that it's worth it. I really think the emphasis should be on helping people come to terms with their body. Like these are serious surgeries, and
and the especially attempted phalloplasty. Have you ever seen Scott Nugent? Has got an arm that will never function properly because of the amount of skin removed to make him a penis that never worked. I say him, I mean clearly Scott's not actually a him, but to make to do a phalloplasty, which have a very high failure rate. Or that lunatic who was on the cover of the magazine in America saying, oh, I needed a penis to be myself. You don't have a penis, you have a sausage of non-erectile tissue that's left a huge scar on your leg. Also, you are patently someone with quite severe mental health issues going on. What anyone was thinking allowing that.
Yeah, well, this is why they go on about trans suicide. So when you're post-operative trans person who's not getting the attention they got while they were, aspiring to transition, who's now living in the body as much the opposite gender as it possibly could be, and when their needs aren't met and they realize they've made a dreadful mistake and they kill themselves. They've already covered it with, it's the bigotry they faced. It's because nobody accepted they were trans. It's because they didn't accept that they were trans and they saw nowhere else to go. Like, I've got friends who I've been through the entire process with. I had a girlfriend when I was 19 and she went through the whole transition and is now one of the most miserable people I know.
Yeah.
You know, and escapes by using drugs, you know, in dysfunctional relationships, works for a parent's, you know, it's not this rainbow that they sell to young people. And this girl grew up in an incredibly homophobic environment. We got the shit kicked out of us just for talking to each other.
Yeah. So don't tell me that that's not based on homophobia, internalized homophobia / misogyny.
And she also is a very convincing trans man. I introduced her to my ex-partner, and I said, "Oh, you know who that is?" And he goes, "No," you know. And I said, "No, that's this, you know, this person." I won't mention their name, and he goes, "Oh, I knew that." He goes, "You wouldn't know, except he had really small hands." But otherwise short, but everyone would just automatically think it was a bloke. And she was a very, you know, butch woman as well. So, you know, it was almost a seamless transition into transgenderism for this person. And yet they are still one of the most unhappy people I know. It's so sad. They're sold a lie.
It's going to be a real struggle for them, isn't it? Because by and large, lesbians don't want to date people who look like men, even if they are partly reading them as female, which is obviously re-traumatizing for the trans person. But, you know, men don't want to date them. We seem to have now this phenomenon of young women believing they can become gay men and whinging on about how gay men don't want to date them because they haven't got dicks. Seriously? How many gay men have they met? You know, the idea that it's truly astonishing that they would believe that. Apparently it has roots in sort of fan fiction and fantasy, and I'm sure some do, but there are also plenty of men who will stick it anywhere in my limited experience of them. Apparently guys will pretend to be bi in order to have sex with these trans identifying young women.
There was... When I first got into this, I joined the group LGBT Australia on Facebook, and they had like just recently dropped the T, and so it was a free for all. Everyone was saying whatever they wanted to say that they'd been holding on to for months and months, and this gay guy jumped in and made a post that was, "I'm gay, but I gotta say, I love smashing trans pussy." And so what you said, that some men are willing to stick it anywhere, you know, that was how I viewed that. Yeah.
There's not enough of them to go round. Your chances of getting a partner plummet with transition.
Yeah.
Which is probably helpful that there's such a high vein of narcissism in the whole thing, that there's a lot of these people are so self-involved. You look at some of the higher profile people and some of the supporters too. I mean, people like bloody Harrop, creepy, useless, you know. I mean, I believe that he has a husband. I don't think he's not going to be smashing any trans pussy anytime soon. And most of, you know, and all that silly cow now in charge of Stonewall, Nancy Kelly, she's not going to be sucking any lady dicks, you know, but it's all kind of, no, they're women, they're men, you know. You might say that, but nobody puts it into practice, or there certainly aren't enough people. I think the poor old bisexuals get to do the heavy lifting here, to be honest, you know, which is a bit rough. And I don't know whether it was you, Angela, or someone else who pointed out recently that surveys show that something like 1.5% of women are actually exclusively lesbian. And even if you round it up to 2, that's a very small number of people. But, you know, there's barely enough for us to share around ourselves without letting men sneak in and grab a few, you know. And generally speaking, if someone I knew got involved with a trans woman, I would no longer regard them as a lesbian. I would see them as bisexual. Yes. And it's fine to be bisexual. I've got some lovely bisexual friends. I've known some lovely trans people, you know. But as a movement, it's fantastically toxic, and it fosters delusion. and the whole thing about the being in danger, being at risk. Where I used to work, where I don't work anymore, they had a guy in to, I thought of him as the Rainbow Dick, because they've got him in to do the Rainbow Tick accreditation. Twat. He's probably still there. Luckily, I'm not.
Hey, Rainbow Dick.
I got in trouble for telling him I thought gender was bollocks and that the whole pronouns thing was ridiculous. And then he spent the rest of the day compiling a complaint about how I wasn't upholding the spirit of the organisation. And I told my boss, who seemed to actually listen, I said, this is ridiculous. You know, lesbians are being particularly hounded.
Was that why you stopped working there?
Sorry? Oh, yeah. It didn't help. I did something else in the wrong order and I got a royal serve. And I said, you know, if you give me some money, I'll go away. So they did. So I got quite a good payout and then had a few months off work, and now I got a job I like more. So you can be promoted beyond your comfort zone, not because you're incompetent, but because a managerial role pays it's so limited in terms of the extra money, and you will be expected to sort of waste your whole life on it. Like, I was never out of the office before 6, wasn't being paid for it, was spending the weekends compiling stats, and you think, what am I doing this to myself for? Anyway, so no, that was the kind of beginning of the end. And I had a colleague who's a galloping narcissist there who told lies about what I'd said to him, that I disparaged trans people. He's the one who started humming Lola from the Kinks song. Which anyone doesn't know Lola, make sure you look it up. It's hilarious. So it was, so that was interesting, but they are a bit down the rabbit hole at that place now. They're kind of people adding pronouns and stuff. But it's interesting. When I was talking or trying to talk to the Rainbow Dick guy, he said, oh, let me show you this, let me show you that. And it was, a lot of it was about was about gender as opposed to sexuality. So Rainbow might ask, but he was kind of, oh, I can't listen to this is so transphobic, and he was kind of backing off like a vampire from sunlight. And I temped somewhere briefly, and then they're very well-meaning, but young woman was saying, oh yeah, you put your name there, but you can put your pronouns, there. I said, I can assure you I can't. And she said, oh, it's all right, it's like, it's voluntary. But it was like this sort of fear, because somewhere inside, people know that it's bollocks. You wouldn't need this level of aggression towards people who call it out. You know, people have lots of different beliefs. I'm sure we could find plenty of things we don't agree on. Is there a monster in Loch Ness? Was Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone? You know, did we land on the moon? You know, but my response to you having a different view to me on those wouldn't be saying, oh my God, you're denying my existence. You know, you want to commit a genocide. You know, whereas the response to even the mildest voice of caution, like what JK Rowling said, so mild, so restrained, and so supportive, but people are sort of analysing it, trying to find proof that actually she wants all trans people rounded up and, you know, put in internment camps where they'll be murdered or possibly used for body parts. You know, it's bonkers. And also there's a massive degree of misogyny, because she gets choke on my lady dick, you evil bitch, whereas Richard Dawkins, who has finally stuck his head above the parapet, and so he should, he's a fucking biologist, you know, gets, oh, I'm very disappointed in you, Richard.
Yeah, total double standard, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you watched the LGB Alliance conference from the UK?
I've no idea. I live here.
They've uploaded it onto YouTube.
Yeah, they did have a conference. They probably, has it happened yet?
Yeah.
They had, I'm sure they had a few demonstrators.
They had some, but surprisingly, it was pretty tame. There weren't many, so they really didn't cause much of a disruption. But yeah, over the Christmas break, I spent time just like binging on YouTube, and I watched and listened to the whole LGB Alliance conference. If anything, just watch Alison Bailey's keynote.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah,
that one was excellent.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And so fearless, and has been so subjected to bullying, but has stood her ground, thankfully.
Yeah. What do you think we need to do here in Australia? Any ideas on how to get our message out?
I think we need to keep reiterating the stuff. I think there is sort of, things are chipping away. You know, I think that more people are saying this is nuts, especially the stuff like they keep their todgers. They, you know, and the voices of trans widows. Why is there more sympathy for this self-indulgent narcissist prick of a guy than there is for the woman who you know is now going to do all the heavy lifting, especially if they're where there are kids, you know, and the pressure to remain and support someone. So I think we need to keep reiterating that. We also need to uphold the right to have a different opinion. I mean, anytime someone suggests to me that JK Rowling's transphobic, I say, I'm not having that discussion with you until you've actually read what she said, because you won't find a word in it that's transphobic. And phobia is an irrational fear or hatred, you know, and it's and most, you know, and obviously it makes sense to be scared of snakes or bloody deadly spiders we've got here. That's not necessarily a phobia unless you're disproportionately afraid, and even the sight of a small harmless spider or a big harmless spider scares the shit out of you, then it's not a phobia. It's not a phobia to say that human beings cannot literally change sex. I think that's, if there's one single message, it needs to be that one. You can't change sex. The voices of detransitioners need to be heard. It also needs to be, and to say, it's fine for people to present how they want. You know, it's fine for women to be butch, for men to be feminine, to the, you know, to the Marilyn or Boy George degree. And wonderful to see Marilyn giving Boy George a good slapping on Twitter. You know, also the trans women I know, none of the trans women I know are a danger to women. Have a look online at all those bastards who go in the toilet and film themselves wanking.
Yeah, I know a lot of trans women, and some of them are dangerous and some aren't, just like I know a lot of men and some of them are dangerous and some aren't.
Yeah.
They're different.
Yeah, how are we supposed to know? Do we make them get, you know, like you have to show your vaccination certificate to go out to dinner? Can they get a non-sexual predator certificate? So when they walk into the ladies, I'm going to need to see your certificate, mate, because, you know, that's not going to work. And the disproportionate degree of upset that it is, ma'am, those guys who just go off. I've been called sir a million times, you know, in my lifetime. I'm older and wider than I used to be now, so I probably look more female. But, you know, I have had so many instances, including ones where people have really argued with me for a while. I was at a conference once and I was heading to the ladies, and an older lady said, "Oh, you're in the wrong one." I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Yes, you are." I said, "No, I'm not." And I did that with my tears. She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And she came up to me about 10 times over the course of the next couple of days to apologise. And I said, "It's fine. I'm used to it. Honestly, it's just funny to me." You know, but so many times. That said, I got pulled speeding on a motorbike on the M62 once, and I was really speeding. I was doing like 120 miles an hour, which is, I don't know, 180 k's. Yeah, and this police car chased me for 3 miles before I noticed him. And but he was so shocked when I turned out to be female, when I took my helmet off, that he gave me this really patronising talking to, and let me go without charging me. And like a good feminist, I let him. I'd have got a ban if he charged me for that. I think it was a bit cheeky. You know, but I've been taken for a bloke so many times. I don't get upset. I don't get angry. You know, and I don't feel like I'm being horribly persecuted. You know, I don't scream, "Haven't you ever seen a lesbian before?"
I think with trans women, it's because deep down they know that they don't pass, and they know that they are male, and the cognitive dissonance going on in there.
That's the only real explanation for the level of anger, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and it is anger. It's this kind of rage, not kind of. I mean, they might post, "Oh, I was so sad," when they're writing it up on Twitter or Facebook, but at the time, it's just this insane fury. Yeah. Doesn't make them any more attractive, does it? I mean, it's.
All right, Jo. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up soon. Was there anything else you wanted to touch upon? Or Ange, did you want to ask anything?
No. I've just been nice listening to Jo's story. I've heard bits of it before, but yeah, you're an important part of our movement here in Melbourne, Jo, because you're one of the people that are willing to face up and put in the footwork as well as just talk about it.
Look, I think it's the more people we can encourage to actually come out, be themselves, and be, and then admit who they are, use their real names. I mean, my real name sounds like an alias, but it is my real name. Yeah. I think that's all to the good in terms of helping keep making this case.
And I think young lesbians need a role model, Jo, and I think you'd be a good one for a lot of young women. Coming out in this day and age would be almost impossible. So yeah, you're a good.
It breaks my heart to see. Thank you for that. It breaks my heart to see these stories of young women bullied into relationships with men. Well, anyway, it's been lovely talking to you.
Thanks for coming on, Jo. Appreciate it. See you next time. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Oh wow. Isn't she great? Jo's great.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. See, Jo's the sort of person that, like I moved out of home very young and I moved into this share house as well. I lived in a house in Brisbane where there was 9 people living in a 3-bedroom house, and we had cut off the veranda into different rooms and things as well. And I was the only person in the house who dated males, like straight person. It was bizarre, and it was people like Jo that accepted me and, loved me back to life almost after the really shit job my parents did, because I was non-conforming, I was, confused about my sexuality, I had all sorts of issues going on. And it was, fellow at the time outcasts like Jo would have been, who nursed me through that important time in my life. And I'm so grateful to them, And a lot of those women, unfortunately, now are identifying as transgender and things like that. And it breaks my heart because girls need role models. We need women to guide us through those times in our lives. We don't need queer, non-binary, whatevers,
It's such a homophobic, misogynistic movement.
It's a revolting cult.
One video I watched in my binging was another one of Excellency's, where she just went through this woman's series of TikTok videos that she'd made. And she was obviously a lesbian in a relationship. It seemed like a live-in relationship with another woman. But she went by non-binary and she had her breasts removed. And there was this TikTok she made where she sees herself topless for the first time after she's had her breasts cut off. And, she's still got the dressings and stitches in. And she just starts crying. And the words that she's saying is, I'm really happy that this has happened, that I've done this. But her emotional reaction really wasn't saying that. And the other interesting thing was that she had phantom nipple pain.
Oh.
Like, how people, when they lose a leg, they can get this phantom pain in the leg that no longer exists because the brain still thinks that the leg is there. So it never really occurred to me that could happen with the double mastectomies, but there you go.
When I was young also, I was a goth, right? And it was my whole world. I didn't get out of bed until I put the slop on, and I still wear black all the time. And, I was a huge part of a subculture. Now, that created barriers for me as I got older, with employment and a whole bunch of, appearance-based cliches that no longer apply anymore. Now you can have tattoos, you can look weird, you can wear makeup and piercings and stuff. But back then, the world was a bit more conservative. And there were certain barriers in life placed in front of me if I was to be of the appearance of someone who was a goth. And being a goth back then was cool. And there weren't many of us. And we got a lot of attention. Now, I think this whole trans thing is in a similar way. It is a useful subculture for young people. It is a way for them to find their tribe and acceptance and social stuff. But being a goth, although you might have got a bad piercing or a tattoo, what was something that when your life required you to step out of it, or when the trend passed in your life, you could turn back into a normal person in order to, meet a partner, get a job, whatever. Now, these kids are embracing this trans stuff in the same way, but they are mutilating. I'll say mutilating. They are mutilating their bodies. You can't undo that. You can't change your mind about that. And I really think that girls like the one in that video, because I remember seeing that video, are going to regret what they have done. And they will go down one of other two pathways. One will be to deny it, and the other will be just devastation.
Yeah.
And it's going to pass. This is a fad. Nothing can have taken on so quickly and become so corporatized. And it's now, I tell my teenagers and their friends, I'll mention something a bit turfy, and they laugh and they say, yeah, everyone's trans now. So if it's that uncool already, 3, 4, 5 years ago, in the future, 3, 4, 5 years in the future, it's going to be the most uncool thing ever to be trans and non-binary. And these girls have taken their breasts off. They've had it's too horrible to even think about.
Yeah. One of the articles that really affected me early on was, I think the author's name was Laura Dodd, maybe, but she had written previous articles about like women's relationship with their breasts and men's relationship with their penis, and they were really insightful. And especially the men's one, because there's stuff in there that as a woman I had never even contemplated. And they got published in mainstream news media publications. But then she did one on detransitioners, and they were all female. They had all grown to realize that they were lesbians, and they had all had their breasts removed. And she's a photographer as well, so she would take photos of them topless with their scars showing. And it's just fucking devastating. I can't believe that this is happening. And really, I think the underlying motivating factor of transgenderism is homophobia.
And trauma too, because it's so hypersexualized. I mean, I remember as a young person walking around trying to hide my chest. I didn't look like this back then, and trying to and not have any attention from men, dressing in masculine ways and just trying to avert the male gaze. And I don't think that I think if anything, that has gotten worse for young women, because there's so many people who are porn sick, and they get introduced to pornographic concepts of what it is to be a woman at such an early age, that puberty and having breasts and presenting as a sexual being is traumatizing for them. And that's why they want to just get rid of it and make it go away. And I'm a survivor of sexual trauma as well. And there were times where I was completely disassociated from my body, and I wanted to be the most repulsive thing to all men because I was terrified of them. I was terrified of all of them because of the behavior of one. But, I understand that. And when people say, oh, you TERFs, you just don't get it. Yeah, we do. Yeah. We've lived that. We've lived that self-loathing and that dissociation, and that just not, trying to avert the male gaze, even if it's just to avert one male's gaze or to avert the entire male gaze. And I can only imagine that it is even worse for young lesbians who are still subjected to the sexualization. I personally was, had opportunities to have long-term relationships with women and was put off by lesbian for the male gaze. Yeah. I was put off it. I didn't want people to judge me because I had a girlfriend. Yeah. I was a kid then and didn't understand it and didn't think it through. Yeah. But the pressure and that just grossness of being, objectified in that way as something for men to wank over, it's just disgusting. And I think a lot of girls dissociate from their bodies because they're traumatized by a porn sick society.
Yeah. I don't know if I've spoken about this before, but there is a really good documentary on YouTube called Childhood 2.0. It is
I've heard about it.
It's well worth a watch, because they interview young people about what it's like growing up with social media and free access to any sort of porn that you can think of. And one of the interesting things that the girl, they interviewed like a group of 4 girls and just had them have a conversation and filmed it. And they were saying that because it's American, I don't know how I think it was around year 8, year 9 at school, or maybe year 9, year 10, there came a point when sending nudes was the big thing. And all these kids are sending fucking nudes to each other, or even videos of them masturbating to each other. And the analogy was that had become first base, was sending nudes. But the girls said that it was very interesting because there was this split down the middle. On this side, you had girls that were willing to send nudes, and on this side, you had girls that weren't willing. The girls that weren't willing were called prudes, and the girls that were willing were called sluts. And and then even the boys that they interviewed, they did the same thing. They had about 4 young men, and they just looked really embarrassed about the fact that they had sent dick pics when they were 14, 15. They're just like, oh. So it's really worth a watch, that documentary.
I'll watch it. Sounds good.
Yeah,
and disturbing.
It really is. And I remember seeing in one gender critical group in America, you can buy phones that don't take, they're not connected to the internet, and you can't take photos on them. And it is that someone was strongly recommending, get your kids this type of phone, so then they're not involved in this shit that's going on at school.
But a lot of it, I mean, my son's got a PlayStation, and he gets pop-ups on his PlayStation feed of porn. Yeah, and like we've got pop-up blockers. I'm quite vigilant about blocking that stuff from my kids, but they still come up through, and just like we can find all the porn that we need through Twitter. Like I've got porn blockers on all my computers and on my phone, so if you put in porn or vagina or something, nothing will come up. I can just go onto Twitter and like a picture, and there's a full porn film.
Yeah.
Especially on the trans activist pages, there's lots and lots of porn on trans people, identifying male pages, porn you just don't ever want to see. But that's that easy to access, and I choose not to look at it. But young people, they're curious.
Yeah.
And the first thing that they can click on could be a gang rape, bestiality, like all sorts of disgusting things, and that could be the first thing they click on, and that all of a sudden,
Yeah. I was going to say also, for a generation that has grown up getting their sex ed from porn, for them to not understand what a lesbian is it's just so stupid.
Yeah, and then they choose to have all that. They get addicted to pornography. They get this perception in their mind that because they, like in the blokes' minds, that they enjoy the submissive role in sex, that they are actually a woman, because women are submissive. And and then they go through all this stuff, and they get the medication, and then their dicks don't work. Like, the idiocy of it. Like, it's ridiculous. So it's a sexual fetish. They go through the whole process of transition, except for the removal of the genitals. And then they go, why doesn't my penis work? And then it goes to that next level where the only way they can get off is by watching other trans people participating in porn. They can't even function in the real world. So, it's definitely online based. Without the internet, this surge in people, in AGPs and people seeking gender transition wouldn't happen. It just would not happen. There'd be the odd transsexual who usually, experienced internalized homophobia and were gay. But all these straights that are, porn sick AGPs that are plaguing our society and that are self-identifying into women's spaces, they wouldn't be here without the internet. I can guarantee it, because people say, oh, you know, they were always here. No, they weren't. They've only been here since the internet's been in our lounge rooms.
What you said about them not being able to get it up after they've gone through hormones and you know and watched all this porn that's desensitized them. And another documentary I watched over the break was Kinsey's Pedophiles. So Kinsey was this sex researcher back in the 50s, and he compiled all this information and released this book. I can't remember what it was called. It was very famous. It sort of kickstarted the sexual revolution, sexual behavior in human males or something like that. But a section of the book was information that he had received from pedophiles. So pedophiles describing what they had done to children and how long it took a child to achieve orgasm in the perception of the pedophile, which, you know, how can you possibly rely on a fucking pedophile's account? And aside from all the other issues involved there. But Kinsey was just obsessed with it all, and, you know, wanted to film 2,000. He wanted 2,000 orgasms recorded on film so that he could study them. And he brought in this other researcher to help him. And he warned this researcher in the first, I think it was a researcher, or maybe it was a filmographer, warned him that, look, the more that you're exposed to this stuff, the harder it will be for you to achieve climax. You will need this ever increasing extremeness around sex and sexuality in order to climax. So even back then, it was known that it was, you know, obvious that being exposed to these extreme pornography is going to affect your ability to orgasm and your ability to have a proper relationship with someone.
And sexual predators escalate. You know, it starts off with, you know, exhibitionism and ends off with rape and murder. Like it's a accepted fact that criminals, their behavior escalates over time. And so, yeah, you know, I'm not saying all trans women are criminals, some are, but yeah, their participation in that stuff is going to escalate. It's just gross. And, you know, all the trans people that I interact with on social media have bios that are full of porn. So there's definitely a link.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
And I think we've gone over time a little bit. So
depressing topic, talking about all pornography and stuff, but it was good to have a chat to Joe. It's you know, yeah, we've covered a lot today.
Yeah.
Hopefully next time you see me, I won't have my arm club and I'll be a bit more comfortable.
Good. Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah, thank you for watching, and thanks for subscribing. And no, I don't read the comments. So yeah, I'm just overwhelmed with the support, you know. That's a lot I'm surprised 5 people are following us, to be honest, because we're just bumbling away. But no, I appreciate it from everybody, and especially you, Stassja, because I wouldn't be here without you. So thank you.
Likewise. Thanks for hassling me to do this.
Yeah, it's all right. Thanks, everybody.
All right, like, subscribe, share, and
bye.
see you next week.